Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, March 14th, 2022. Happy Pi Day. Today we're going to be taking a look at President Donald Trump's favorability rating and putting it up next to President Joe Biden's approval rating to see where the major differences lie and how the two presidents, despite having very vastly different support groups and core bases, have a very similar approval rating when it comes down to the way that the nation views them individually. And of course, it's not coming from the same people, but it is interesting to see that about a good amount to 15 to 20% of the nation does not seem to either like Joe Biden or Donald Trump while vehemently supporting the other party, which is just a very interesting thing to see. Right now, Donald Trump, in terms of his net favorability rating, and this is not in terms of job approval. Obviously, with Donald Trump being out of office, you can't really gauge his ability to execute the office of President of the United States. And typically speaking, favorability ratings tend to favor the incumbent president a little bit more. But looking at the favorability rating for Donald Trump, him being down 10.5% is an uptick from where he was in terms of his overall approval, and that likely is due to the fact that he no longer is in office. Every time a president decides to leave office, their favorability rating typically does increase, including those who are failed past presidential candidates, including Secretary Hillary Clinton, Governor Mitt Romney, Senator John McCain, and so on and so forth. Looking at Donald Trump at being down 10.5%, you can see this as a direct comparison to Joe Biden being down a good margin here, about 9.1% across the nation. So, Joe Biden at a 42.9% approval rating, Donald Trump at a 42.5% favorability rating. They're actually very, very similar. Now, it is an interesting thing to see that Joe Biden actually isn't approved of as much as he is, or disliked in terms of his approval, as much as he is disliked as a person. And that is just something that has been very different from what we should expect when it comes down to favorability rating. Favorability rating is pretty much gauging how much you actually like a person, whether or not you think they are a good person, someone who could eventually hold office correctly, how you just view them, favorable or unfavorable, whereas the approval rating is, putting this person in a position of power. Regardless if you like them or not, do you think they are doing a good job? Do you think they are actually following through with what they said they were going to do? So that is the major difference between approval and favorability rating, but it is interesting to see that Joe Biden is actually unfavored more than he is disapproved of, considering that that is very different from what we have seen in years past with other presidents. But of course, things are very weird in the realm of American politics, and also the favorability rating polls are polled a lot more infrequently when it comes down to President Biden compared to approval rating polls, which many polls just decide that this is one and the same, when in reality they aren't. But for the sake of this video, we're going to be looking at all metrics in order to compare Joe Biden and Donald Trump when it comes down to the way that the nation views them. Now, for Donald Trump on Real Clear Politics, what you're going to find is that the favorability rating here shows negative 8.2%. So again, better than Joe Biden, but that actually isn't the case when it comes down to the FiveThirtyEight numbers. So you're going to see a bit of a discrepancy when it comes down to FiveThirtyEight versus Real Clear Politics. Sometimes Real Clear Politics decides to include pollsters that FiveThirtyEight does not, and vice versa, and thus you start to see a 1 to 2% difference. While that isn't something super substantial, on one hand, Real Clear Politics is telling you Trump is more favored than Biden, and then on the other hand, FiveThirtyEight is telling you something opposite. So a little bit interesting, but main thing to take away is that they're all within their standard margin of error. They're all within about 2 to 3 percentage points of each other, so there isn't much of a discrepancy there, just minor differences when it comes to analysis and takeaways from the numbers that we're looking at. Now, Donald Trump being down as much as Joe Biden, or more so Joe Biden being down as much as Donald Trump, is not a good sign for the Democratic Party. And I say the Democratic Party and not the Republican Party because Republicans don't need a favorability rating in order to win. One thing became very clear when Joe Biden was approved of by 7 points, then only won the popular vote by 4.5, that despite being approved of by 7, that did not translate into a 7-point victory. Joe Biden needed to be approved of to win the election. Donald Trump did not need to be approved of, and he got extremely close. Donald Trump was disapproved of by 8 points across the nation, and yet made up 3.5% in terms of the overall net, and continued to nearly win the election. Won in Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Florida, won in many, many states, and yet was still disapproved of by 8 points nationwide. And seeing Donald Trump now down 10.5%, sure. You could argue that the GOP is probably in a worse position right now with Trump than they were maybe in 2020, and that is a debatable argument. But for Joe Biden to be disapproved of, that's where you start to see some major concern for the Democratic Party. Approval rating has never been something that has been the sole determining factor as to how a political party performs, but the standards for the Republican Party and for Donald Trump, I would argue, are necessarily lower in terms of the favorability rating, in terms of what an approval rating means. You see, Donald Trump and the Republican Party have been able to survive many many close elections despite Donald Trump being disapproved of by a very large amount. I mean, even in the 2016 election, when many people were saying, I disagree with the way that Donald Trump handles politics, I disagree with Donald Trump as a person, he was still getting a substantial portion of the vote, and he still won the election despite being down about net 20 points nationwide. So voters were very much out there saying, I'm going to vote for him, but I don't view him in a favorable light. I don't approve of the way he's handling his candidacy. Then when he became president of the United States, you started to see things narrow up for him, and then they started to expand and narrow up and expand again. For some reason, Donald Trump is able to get things right around together when it comes down to the midterm elections, when it comes down to his regular elections, both in the presidential 2016 and presidential 2020. Donald Trump knows how to captivate the media and also turn on that presidential switch as much as he needs to. Joe Biden, I would say, as much as he is trying and has maintained this quote-unquote presidential image, doesn't necessarily mean that translates into public favor or public approval. And the numbers are continuing to prove that. Joe Biden is at a bit of a convergence point here where, or he was exactly about halftime between his presidency starting and now. And you start to see how the disapproved number is taking away from the approved number, meaning that there was more time disapproved than there was approved under the Biden presidency. Now, under Donald Trump, there was not a single point in time where he was approved of besides the first 2 weeks of his presidency, so it is a bit different to see. But again, keeping that in mind, when Donald Trump nearly won the 2020 election, when Republicans gained seats in the United States Senate, despite Trump not being approved of at any point after the first 2 weeks, I mean, you're not talking about a single time outside of the first week of February in 2017 that Donald Trump was approved of, yet Republicans found ways to advance themselves in the United States Senate in 2018. They found ways to advance themselves in 2020, while nearly every single down ballot race, when it came down to state legislative races, important congressional races, they won every single toss-up seat, and yet Donald Trump lost the election, but not by a lot, right? So approval rating, I would argue, matters a lot less for the Republican Party and it does for Donald Trump, but to see Joe Biden and Donald Trump in such a close position is actually very interesting. And another thing I do want to point out is that looking at the approval rating of Trump exactly at this point during his first term versus Joe Biden's first term, you will find that Biden is only about 2.4% above Donald Trump, which means that the country is moving away from Biden the same way they did for Donald Trump. I would also like to argue that the generic ballot doesn't reflect the same things that the generic ballot was reflecting in 2017 for Donald Trump, obviously in terms of who was leading, but in terms of the leads for the opposing political party at the time. 2017 was the Democrats, now is the Republican Party. You're actually seeing some major differences here. About 4 years ago today, the Democratic Party was up 7-8 points nationwide. Right now, the Republicans are only up about 1 to 2 percentage points. So you're not necessarily seeing as much anti-Biden vote turning into Republican vote share as you saw anti-Trump vote turn into Democratic Party vote share, but there is still a lot of time, and Donald Trump's approval rating and Joe Biden's approval rating have been extremely close for the past month now, and there is no sign that that is going to change dramatically into the 2022 midterm elections unless something substantially changes on the national level or potentially on the international level. And I think as we continue to analyze Joe Biden's approval rating, we will find that it matters more when it comes down to the general election in 2024 about Biden's approval rating, because right now, Donald Trump actually has a lead over Joe Biden when it comes down to 2024. Every single poll, besides the Federalist, Political Morning Consult, and Wall Street Journal, showed Donald Trump ahead by sometimes some pretty substantial amounts. USA Today has him up by 4, Rasmussen Reports has him up by 13. Insider Advantage has him up by 8. Emerson College has him up by 4. Harvard Harris has him up by 6. You're looking at reputable pollsters that show Donald Trump with some pretty substantial leads nationwide. So there is that big fall off when it comes down to disapproving of Biden and voting for the Republican Party in 2022. But for 2024, it seems as if at least some voters are more inclined now to vote for Trump than they were back in the 2020 election. So the approval rating definitely matters, but it is just very interesting to see that Trump can be defeating, Biden by 6, 4, 8, 13, 4, yet be disapproved of by the same amount on the same exact polling company, the same exact polling questionnaire, and amongst the same sample. Yet Donald Trump is the one who comes out with the upper hand because Donald Trump's, entire candidacy was never founded on being liked. His entire candidacy was never founded on being the it candidate, the popular candidate. And more so, he was just there because he was the non-politically correct candidate in 2016. He did things very differently than all of his opponents, and nobody thought of him as a real threat. Republicans laughed it off, and they said, this lead is only here because he's a household name. As soon as Jeb Bush wins South Carolina, it's over. As soon as Ted Cruz Cruz wins Texas and all of their delegates, it's over. As soon as Marco Rubio wins Florida, John Kasich wins Ohio, which he did. But, if Marco Rubio wins Florida, then it's over. And it was all of this discussion about it being over, the comments that were leaked 3 weeks before the election. It was over for Trump. Nobody took him seriously, and his approval rating took a hit because of it. Because nobody took him seriously, there was no major effort on the Republican side to at least build up his character, build up his name. No major effort on the Donald Trump side, because they said, as much as there are naysayers out there that are saying I'm too unpopular to win, people don't like me, people don't like my rhetoric, I'm still winning. Election, primary, caucus, right? Everything was working on Trump's side, so there was no incentive to build up the name. On the other hand, they were looking at it saying, laughing it off, saying this is not going to be the result. Hillary Clinton is going to win this election. So the Republican Party also wasn't necessarily too inclined to also make Donald Trump the face of their party, make him the studded candidate, the one who they wanted to be the visionary for the future of the party. And then everyone was proven wrong. And Donald Trump did that without being approved of. I cannot say the same would have happened for any Democrat, or will happen for any Democrat in 2024 unless they are popular. You start to see this divide in general election polling. You see it also without Joe Biden being on the ballot when there are questions about potentially Kamala Harris being the nominee. Kamala Harris, in terms of policy, does not actually differ much from Joe Biden. She definitely has moved herself closer to the center, more towards the moderate Democratic Party once she became Joe Biden's vice presidential nominee. And you start to see that because Kamala Harris is not approved of, because voters just simply do not like her, that she loses to Donald Trump by some pretty substantial amounts, by 5 points at a minimum. You're talking about another poll that shows her down 12 points on the same one where Biden is down only 6. You see how many voters turn away from Kamala Harris, not necessarily because they like Trump, because Donald Trump is still disapproved of, but because they don't like Kamala Harris, and it matters a lot more for a Democrat. And I think that is just the very interesting thing about this, that Donald Trump can go ahead and be down 10.5%, yet win when Democrats, being down 10.5%, lose by cataclysmic proportions, right? Historically speaking, 2010, 2014, when an incumbent Democratic president is disapproved of, what happens? Republicans surge. They win 63 seats in the House, they win 9 seats in the United States Senate, and the Democrats have no way of fighting back. But now I would say it is also a different national environment where Republicans aren't getting that type of excited vote share like they saw with the Tea Party in 2010 or, that Republican resurgence in 2014. But also, I will say that it is alarming for the Democratic Party that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are so close together, and I think that it is even more alarming that in some polls, Joe Biden's disapproved of more than Donald Trump is. I told you in the beginning of this video that 15 to 20% of the nation doesn't really like to pick a side. They pretty much just dislike Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and that very much is the case. But of course, those who are approving of Joe Biden, approving of Donald Trump, those aren't the same people. There's Republicans for Trump and Democrats for Biden. But it's just very fascinating to see how the numbers tend to bring themselves about the same exact margin, the same exact percentage in terms of favorability rating. You're talking 43 for Trump, 43 for Biden. When it comes down to real clear politics, you're talking about 43 for Biden, and also, let's go ahead and see here, 44 for Trump. So nothing super substantial in terms of the difference. Just the only thing that it is a very bad look for the Democratic Party to be down further than Donald Trump, even if it is real clear politics saying it, even if it is 538 being a point off difference. What you should take away from this is that the Democrats being down this far is a bad sign, whereas for the Republican Party, it really doesn't mean much. And also, you do have to take into account that Joe Biden is now the president of the United States. That's why you see poll day after day talking about his approval rating, because he matters more than any other politician in the nation. He matters more than Trump. He matters more than Kamala. He matters more than, Pelosi, anyone else, right? He matters more than any other national politician because he is the face of the nation. The same way that Donald Trump got blamed for COVID-19 and many other things, and the argument can be made, rightfully so or not, and discussions about that can be talked about in a future video, but the point being that Donald Trump got the blame of COVID-19 because he was president of the United States. Had Hillary Clinton been president, she would have gotten the blame. Had Barack Obama somehow been in a third term, he would have gotten the blame, right? So looking at who won that 2016 election, everything that happened between 2017 and early 2021 was under their watch and under their fault, under their, to blame. The same thing is happening right now for Joe Biden. You see Ukraine, you see gas prices, you see Russia, you see anything else. COVID-19 resurgence, potentially another Omicron wave that just hit Europe that is potentially about to hit America now. I mean, all of these things are taken under consideration and discussed when it comes down to the incumbent president's approval rating, and that's why Joe Biden is down by such a high amount. I can guarantee you that had Biden lost the election in 2020, he would have maintained that popular image, which is partially why I think Donald Trump is narrowly increasing. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump doesn't need it. The Democratic Party does need it, and they have needed it time and time again. And it doesn't look like they will have this super popular image like they did in the 2020 election. And it probably will be much more difficult to rebuild it following all of these things that have happened under Biden's first year in office. But again, that's something that's completely not, something that is going to happen regardless, and I think the Democratic Party can try to combat it as much as they can, but it is going to be very difficult to prevent the inevitable when it comes down to negative things happening, negative international relations, and all of that does, unfortunately for Biden, go under his blame. And again, an argument can be made whether it's his fault or not, but to the American voter, they see that things are happening across the nation that are negative. Gas prices are rising. The Democratic trifecta can't seem to get things together. And who do they turn to? They either turn to the Republican Party or turn to say, I don't like Joe Biden, but I'm still iffy about who I'm voting for, which still is not necessarily good news for the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.